Falling Roof Tortoise. On a quiet afternoon in 456 BC, the city of Gela on the island of Sicily was home to one of the ancient world's greatest minds. Aeschylus was a playwright whose tragedies had shaped Athenian theater for decades. He was 70 years old, his reputation secured, his work performed across the Greek world. On that particular day, he decided to sit outside, enjoying the Mediterranean sun. His head was completely bald, polished smooth by age. Above him, an eagle circled in the cloudless sky. The bird had spotted prey, a tortoise crawling slowly across the rocky ground below. Eagles had developed a specific hunting technique for these hard-shelled creatures. They would seize them in their talons, carry them high into the air, then drop them onto rocks to shatter the protective shell and expose the soft flesh inside. It was an efficient method, refined over generations. The eagle descended, grabbed the tortoise, and began climbing altitude. From hundreds of feet above, the bird scanned the landscape for a suitable stone. Then, it saw Aeschylus. The smooth, rounded surface of his bald skull reflected the sunlight. To the eagle's eyes, it appeared identical to the pale rocks scattered across the Sicilian terrain. The bird adjusted its flight path and released its grip. The tortoise fell. It accelerated downward, spinning slightly as it dropped. Aeschylus never saw it coming. The shell struck his head with tremendous force. The impact was precise and brutal. His skull fractured instantly under the weight and velocity. Witnesses nearby heard the crack, saw the playwright collapse, saw the tortoise lying beside his body. There was no time for pain, no moment of realization. The blow killed him before his mind could process what had happened. The man who had written of gods and heroes, of battles and betrayals, of noble deaths on distant shores, died because a bird mistook his head for a rock. His body was found moments later, the tortoise still beside him, its shell unbroken. Choking on laughter. In 207 BC, the island of Rhodes was home to one of the ancient world's most respected philosophers. Chrysippus had dedicated his life to Stoic philosophy and logic, building arguments with precision and defending reason above emotion. He was 73 years old, his mind still sharp, his reputation unshakable. On that particular evening, he attended a feast at a wealthy patron's home. The wine flowed freely. In Greek culture, wine was typically mixed with water to moderate its effects, but Chrysippus drank his unmixed. The pure alcohol content was far stronger, and as the night progressed, his judgment began to slip. He grew louder, more animated, finding humor in things that would normally seem unremarkable. His inhibitions dissolved with each cup. At some point during the feast, Chrysippus noticed his donkey had wandered into the courtyard. The animal was eating a pile of fresh figs that had been set aside for the guests. The sight struck the philosopher as absurdly funny. In his intoxicated state, he called out to one of the slaves. "Give the donkey wine," he ordered. "Pure wine, just like mine. Let the creature drink as I have drunk." The slave hesitated but obeyed. The donkey was given undiluted wine. Chrysippus watched the animal's confusion, its awkward movements as it tasted the strong liquid. The image of a drunk donkey, combined with his own inebriated state, sent him into uncontrollable laughter. He doubled over, clutching his sides, unable to stop. The laughter built on itself, becoming more violent with each breath. Then his airway closed. The spasms in his chest disrupted his breathing rhythm. He gasped but couldn't draw air. His face turned red, then purple. The laughter had collapsed his throat and now he was suffocating. Other guests rushed to help, pounding his back, trying to force air into his lungs. Nothing worked. Chrysippus fell to the floor, still convulsing, still unable to breathe. Within moments, his body went limp. The philosopher who had spent decades teaching control and rational thought died choking on his own laughter, killed by a joke about a drunk donkey. Skull crushed violently. In 272 BC, the city of Argos became a battleground for one of the ancient world's most brilliant military commanders. Pyrrhus had spent decades leading armies, conquering territories, and earning a reputation for tactical genius that rivaled Alexander the Great. He was 46 years old, still commanding from the front lines, still believing himself invincible. On that day, he led his forces into the narrow streets of Argos, determined to capture the city. The fighting was chaotic. Buildings pressed close on both sides, turning the battle into a desperate brawl. Soldiers clashed sword to sword, pushing through doorways and alleyways. Pyrrhus wore his armor and helmet, moving through the violence with practiced skill. He had survived countless battles before. This one seemed no different. Above the street, an old woman stood on her rooftop, watching the carnage below. She searched the crowd for her son, praying he had survived. Then she saw him. He was locked in combat with a warrior in elaborate armor. The warrior pressed forward, driving her son backward, blade raised. She recognized the attacker. It was Pyrrhus himself. Panic seized her. Without thinking, she grabbed the nearest object, a heavy clay roof tile. The tiles were thick and solid, designed to withstand years of weather. She lifted it above her head and hurled it down toward the king. The tile tumbled through the air, spinning as it fell. It struck Pyrrhus directly on his helmeted head. The impact was stunning. The weight and velocity drove him to his knees. His vision blurred. The helmet had absorbed some of the force, but not enough. He swayed, disoriented, trying to stand. In that moment of vulnerability, an Argive soldier saw his chance. The man rushed forward and drove his sword through the king's neck. Blood poured from the wound. Pyrrhus collapsed into the street dirt, his body twitching, then still. The general who had commanded armies across the Mediterranean died in a narrow alley, brought down by an elderly mother protecting her child. Attacked by dogs. In 406 BC, one of Athens' three great tragedians left his home city for the kingdom of Macedonia. Euripides had spent decades writing plays that challenged convention and questioned authority, earning him both admirers and enemies. He was 74 years old when he accepted King Archelaus' invitation to live at the Macedonian court. It was meant to be a peaceful retirement, far from the political tensions of Athens. One afternoon, Euripides walked near the village of Aretusa. The area was isolated, surrounded by forests where nobles hunted. He traveled alone or with minimal company, enjoying the quiet landscape. He did not know that a pack of hunting dogs had been released earlier that day. The animals were trained for aggression, bred to chase down boar and deer, conditioned to attack without hesitation. The dogs picked up his scent. They moved as a coordinated unit, spreading out to surround their target. Euripides heard them before he saw them, the sound of paws striking earth, the low growls building in their throats. He turned and saw the pack emerging from the tree line. There was nowhere to run, no shelter nearby, no one to call for help. The first dog lunged. Its jaws clamped onto his leg, teeth tearing through fabric and flesh. Euripides screamed and tried to pull away, but a second animal attacked from behind, biting into his arm. Then the entire pack joined. They pulled him to the ground, their weight pinning him as they bit repeatedly. He thrashed and struck at them, but each movement only excited them further. The dogs tore at his torso and throat. Blood soaked into the dirt beneath him. His screams weakened as his strength drained away. The animals continued their assault, driven by instinct, unable to stop even as their prey went limp. By the time witnesses arrived, drawn by the distant sounds of the attack, it was far too late. Euripides lay motionless on the ground, his body savaged beyond recognition. The playwright who had written of human suffering and divine cruelty died in the dirt, ripped apart by animals trained for sport. Boiled to death. In 182 BC, the Pergamene army pushed deep into Galatia under King Eumenes II. Among the commanding officers was a general named Attalus, a skilled military leader who had fought in multiple campaigns across Asia Minor. He was experienced, respected by his men, and accustomed to the dangers of battle. On that day, his unit engaged Galatian forces in open combat. The fighting was fierce. Galatian warriors were known for their aggression and their use of javelins. During the clash, one of those javelins found its mark. The weapon struck Attalus in his side, penetrating between his ribs. He fell, bleeding but conscious. His men carried him from the battlefield to the medical tent. The wound was deep but appeared survivable. Ancient physicians had treated similar injuries before. The camp doctors examined him. They followed the medical theories of their time, theories based on balance and purification. For a penetrating wound like this, they believed heat would cleanse the injury and prevent infection. They decided on a treatment that involved applying boiling liquid directly into the wound cavity. It was considered standard practice, a method meant to cauterize and sterilize. Water was heated over the fire until it reached a violent boil. Attalus was held down by several soldiers. The physicians poured the scalding liquid into his open wound. The scream that followed could be heard across the entire camp. His skin blistered instantly. The heat spread through his flesh, cooking tissue from the inside. The pain was beyond anything battle had prepared him for, but the damage went far deeper than the surface. The boiling water destroyed muscle, damaged organs near the wound site, and sent his body into immediate shock. His heart rate spiked. His breathing became rapid and shallow. The physicians continued their work, believing they were saving him, unaware they had just killed him. Within hours, Attalus's condition deteriorated completely. His body could not recover from the thermal trauma. Infection and organ failure followed quickly. He died in agony, not from the Galatian javelin that wounded him, but from the boiling water that was supposed to heal him. Beaten by olives. In 29 BC, the son of Marcus Antonius and Cleopatra found himself a prisoner of Octavian following the Battle of Actium. The boy was also called Drusus, though most knew him by his other name, Alexander Helios, the Sun. He was 10 years old when his parents were defeated, 13 when Octavian decided his continued existence posed a political threat. Royal blood made him dangerous, a potential rallying point for those who opposed Rome's new order. Octavian's soldiers seized him in Alexandria. He was bound and dragged through the streets behind a moving chariot, displayed to the public as a symbol of Rome's total victory over Egypt. His two sisters were forced to watch, held by guards as their brother was pulled across the stone roads. His body scraped against the ground, leaving skin and blood in his wake. When the chariot finally stopped, the soldiers decided on a weapon. They chose an olive branch, thick and solid, stripped from a nearby tree. The symbolism was deliberate. The olive represented peace, victory, Roman civilization. To use it as an instrument of violence was a message, a demonstration of Rome's absolute power over the conquered. The first blow struck across his back. The wood was heavier than it appeared, dense and unforgiving. His spine absorbed the impact, vertebrae cracking under the force. The soldiers continued, striking his shoulders, his ribs, his skull. Each swing broke bones. Each impact tore flesh. His sisters screamed, but the guards held them in place, forcing them to witness every moment. Blood poured from his head where the branch had split his scalp. His breathing became labored as broken ribs punctured his lungs. He tried to curl into himself for protection, but the ropes kept him exposed. The beating continued methodically, without emotion. The soldiers were simply following orders. His skull fractured from repeated blows to the head. Internal bleeding flooded his chest cavity. His body convulsed once, then went still. Alexander Helios died in a public square, bonked repeatedly with a symbol of peace, while his sisters watched and Rome celebrated its triumph. Poisoned in prison. In 399 BC, the city of Athens put one of its most famous philosophers on trial. Socrates was 70 years old, known throughout Greece for questioning authority and challenging conventional wisdom. The charges against him were impiety and corrupting the youth of Athens. After a trial before hundreds of citizens, he was found guilty and sentenced to death. The execution method would be hemlock poison. Athenian law gave condemned prisoners a choice. They could attempt escape, go into exile, or accept their sentence. Socrates had opportunities to flee. Friends offered him money and safe passage out of the city. He refused. He believed that escaping would contradict everything he had taught about law and justice. If he had lived by philosophy, he would die by it as well. On the final day, guards brought him a cup filled with hemlock extract. The liquid was dark and had a bitter smell. His students gathered around him, many weeping, begging him to reconsider. Socrates remained composed. He took the cup without hesitation and drank it completely. The taste was harsh, but he showed no reaction. The poison worked methodically. Hemlock contains alkaloids that paralyze the body from the extremities inward. Socrates was instructed to walk around the cell until his legs felt heavy. Within minutes, numbness spread through his feet and calves. He lay down on the prison bed as the paralysis climbed higher. His students watched, helpless, as his body slowly shut down. He continued speaking even as the poison advanced. His mind remained clear while his physical form failed. The coldness reached his thighs, then his abdomen. His breathing became shallow as the paralysis approached his chest. He made one final statement about owing a rooster to Asclepius, the god of medicine, a debt that needed settling. Then the paralysis reached his heart and lungs. His chest stopped moving. His eyes remained open but unseeing. Socrates died surrounded by his students, conscious until the final moments, choosing his own end rather than abandoning his principles. The philosopher who had spent his life questioning how to live well demonstrated how to die well. Starved and scavenged. In 468 BC, the Spartan regent found himself accused of medizing, collaborating with Persia against Greek interests. Pausanias had once been a military hero, the commander who led Greek forces to victory at Plataea. But suspicion and political rivalry turned his own countrymen against him. When Spartan authorities came to arrest him, he fled through the streets of Sparta, desperate for sanctuary. He reached the temple of Athena of the Brazen House and pushed through its doors. Sacred law protected anyone who sought refuge in a temple. The Spartans could not drag him out without committing sacrilege, polluting the holy space with violence. But they refused to let him escape either. The ephors gathered outside and debated their options. They settled on a solution that respected the letter of the law while ensuring his death. They would wall him inside. Workers brought bricks and mortar to the temple entrance. Stone by stone, they sealed the doorway while Pausanias watched from within. The opening grew smaller with each layer until only darkness remained. He was entombed in a sacred space, cut off from food, water, and light. The chamber was barely large enough to move. Days passed. Thirst came first, a burning dryness that consumed every thought. Then hunger followed, a deep ache that spread through his body. His mind began to fracture, seeing shapes in the darkness, hearing voices that were not there. His body consumed itself, breaking down muscle for energy. He called out but received no answer. The walls absorbed his voice. After nearly a week, the Spartans heard him weakening. They made a calculated decision. Just before his final breath, they tore down enough bricks to drag his dying body outside. This ensured the temple would not be polluted by a corpse within its walls. Pausanias was pulled onto the temple steps, barely conscious, his body wasted to bone. He died moments later on the sacred ground. But the Spartans did not bury him. His corpse was left exposed where it fell. Stray dogs found him within hours. They tore at his flesh, scattered his remains across the temple courtyard. The military hero who had once saved Greece ended his food for animals.